in the sense that it is there for you, and you have the right to copy, modify, redistribute, recompile, and reinstall the software from its very start and existence. But I think a lot of people don't think about how that happens. Like, what were the mechanisms and policies and legal details of how that happened? Now, I should mention, I'm going to be mentioning some legalistic things in this talk. I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. I do expect to see this talk again in front of me at the Vizio trial when I'm on the stand. So, hello, Judge. Yes, I figured that that Vizio might want to interrogate me about this talk, but I'm happy to answer questions on it because I think it will explain a lot of things about why we care about the rights that you get with FOSS. Now, the way you get your rights with FOSS is because of licensing. Licensing, for most people, is an annoying thing to talk about. It's a thing that lawyers do, and it sounds really boring, and a lot of details and legalese and those sorts of things. But I got into licensing heavily for FOSS in 1996, 1997, and the reason I found it so compelling was because policy matters. What rights you have matters. What laws you live under matter. And it is very important to understand it, and you don't need to be a lawyer to understand it. Lawyers like to tell you, you can't understand any of this stuff, you need to call a lawyer, and you should call a lawyer if you need legal advice. However, it is possible to understand, and it should be possible to understand what your rights are under an agreement, because you need to be able to exercise those rights, and if you don't understand what they are, it's pretty hard to exercise them. So this is a very brief tutorial. I know a lot of people who come to SCaLE don't do open source like policy stuff every day. SCaLE may be the only time a year you sit down and think about policy stuff. But I want to give this really brief tutorial for those in the room who might be new to it. This is very simple overview that is incredibly simplified, and so there's a lot of nuance that I'm ignoring by presenting it this way. But basically, FOSS licenses have two flavors. One is the non-copyleft flavor, and that's things like 3 calls BSD, the Apache license, MIT license. And there's copyleft licenses, like the GPL, the LGPL, the AGPL, and Copyleft next. And that's enough to get by if you want to understand FOSS licensing. There's a lot of nuance there, and if you're interested, we can take Q&A about all the nuance about it, but generally speaking, you do that. I just want to mention that I'm using the name Apache because that's the name they've chosen to use for their organization, their project, and their license. I have long felt that that is not an appropriate name to use since the Apache tribe of Native Americans are not involved with the project in any way. I know that there are people in the Apache Software Foundation working to change the name, and I hope they will do it very quickly. So I want to make the case that Copyleft is fundamentally a better way to do FOSS licensing. BSD folks who are around the conference, they're not big fans of Linux, and they're not big fans of the GPL, and they'll probably talk your ear off if you'd like to hear about why Copyleft is bad, but I want to argue why Copyleft is actually better. And it's better because it's a real policy that embodies your rights into a document that you can rely on. You have a recourse if your software is under copyleft when you get it, if you have trouble finding the source code, modifying the source code, sharing the source code with your friends, rebuilding the source code, modifying the software, rebuilding it, and reinstalling it into the device that you have, whatever the Linux device is, be it a wireless router, a television, a laptop. And if the software is not copyleft, that means that the distributor in between you and the upstream, right? So an upstream project releases the software. They give you all those permissions. If you go to their main website of where the project is developed, you'll get all those rights. However, the entity in between, which is often a for-profit company, is within their rights to take away your rights. So they can do that with non-copylefted software, and by the time you get it, it will look nothing like FOSS anymore. In fact, if you have an iPhone, you have this, because many components in iOS, or if you have a Mac in Mac OS, are in fact from the BSD project. And Steve Jobs and now Tim Cook decided you shouldn't have any rights. They said, oh, we don't want our users to have rights. We control everything. We'll protect their privacy by controlling all that they do. And so while that was FOSS once upon a time, it doesn't bear any resemblance to FOSS by the time you get it. If it were copylefted, well, first of all, Steve Jobs hated copyleft his whole life and wouldn't use it. But if it had been, you would have those rights. So copyleft has to initiate somewhere. I talked about the idea that the software is born free. Well, how is it born free? Well, what happens is when somebody starts writing the software, which is the copyright holder, which is usually the original developer, although there's some complexities there that I can take Q&A on if you're in the audience saying, well, that's not exactly right. Yes, that's true, but let's talk about during Q&A. But that copyright holder, who's the original developer, chooses to license their work a certain way. Now, they have the right to do that because they're the copyright holder, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how they have exclusive powers under copyright to choose how their license is. And what a copyleft software author says is, I believe in the world's right to copy, share, modify, redistribute, reinstall this software, and so I'm going to choose affirmatively this agreement for my software, and the only way that people can get my software is under this license that gives people those rights, and I can be assured as it spreads around the world as a copyright holder that they will have those rights. Now, in theory, that's how it's all supposed to work. In practice, the license is often violated. So what happens is in the distribution chain, somebody fails to do what that agreement required, and then everybody downstream from that piece of the distribution chain doesn't get the rights because the violator failed to arrange what they were supposed to arrange, that they would get all those rights when they received the software. So I've been doing GPL enforcement for a long time. I worked my first GPL enforcement matter in 1999. That was against a company called Veritas. I feel like it's been so many years I can say now who it was. And I continued to work on GPL enforcement basically for all of my career. Somehow I fell into being the GPL enforcement guy for my whole career because, as I said, I was very interested in the policy aspects of it. And a big thing that happened, and this relates a great deal to the talk you just heard for Denver, is this wireless router came out. And this was the first really versatile wireless router, and it was the first one to our knowledge, that ran a Linux-based system. So when it came out in 2003, people quickly discovered that it had a Linux-based firmware. And I put together a coalition of copyright holders who wanted to do the enforcement to get the source code for this wireless router. And we used to have a weekly meeting from that period, from April to November in 2003. Every week we had a phone call with everybody involved. I was involved from the NetFilter project was involved. Eric Anderson for the BusyBox project was involved, a few others. And Harold, it was so, he was very young then. I didn't realize how young he was at the time. And I think he was like 22 at the time or something like that. And he would sit on the call, say nothing. At the very end, and his accent, his German accent was much heavier then, and he would say, "Why have we not sued them yet?" That's all he would say. And the thing is, Harold was right. We should have sued because what ultimately happened is Linksys did come into compliance, but their upstream Broadcom did not. So we got the software released mostly, but Broadcom withheld the driver for the wireless card. And their argument, and if you saw Denver's talk, you'll be hearing it again. Their argument was, well, the FCC, the FCC will never let us do that, and we'll be in violation of the regulations if we release the driver, and so we can't release the driver. And they flew 9 Broadcom executives to meet me with our attorneys at the time and deliver this message that they just couldn't release the driver. And we made a mistake. We should have said, well, we're going to sue you for that, and the courts will figure it out. Because as it turns out, the FCC didn't mind at all, as we found out when Denver built the OpenWRT1 with the OpenWRT project. So, and there was other policy details in there. The FCC published a ruling in 2008 that basically said they were not worried about this issue of open source drivers for wireless cards and so forth. So it's a huge mistake. I mean, I consider this one of the biggest mistakes of my career. I think things would have played out a lot better if I had just held steadfast and said, we're suing no matter what, and I'll find a way. And because it took us, what are we now, 22 years hence, it took that long to definitively prove they were wrong in that meeting in 2003. So I wish we'd done it a lot faster. But the good news is that everything except the wireless driver was released, and that actually became, this page is not live. I took a screenshot of this years ago, and the OpenWRT developers actually don't know where that copy of the website is. So I have the screenshot from years ago, and they also don't know where the original SVN tree is, which if anybody has, I would love to get, if you have an SVN checkout from OpenWRT circa the 2009 timeframe, because I can show in that, because I remember seeing it on the screen. I remember checking it out right after the OpenWRT project site. I was so excited when I did SVN log in those days, that's what you did. And I saw R1 as dumped by Linksys. And that was how they got started. They took that source code release and then started a project, which they then ported to hundreds and hundreds of different wireless router, and now today producing their own hardware with the OpenWRT ones that we see all over the conference here that Denver talked about earlier. So it's a huge success of the GPL and Copyleft. OpenWRT would not exist if Linux had not been under the GPL and we had not done enforcement. And that's really important to think about when you hear people saying, well, Copyleft is a problem and so forth. Well, there are lots of companies that will not release their source code unless there's a policy agreement that requires them to do so contractually. And that's what the GPL and other Copyleft licenses are. So after the Linksys case, I moved on to continue to do GPL investigations over the years in the mid to late 2000s. And basically, I began to realize that almost the entire industry was violating the GPL, as it turned out. I had a giant database at the time. Many of the companies are defunct, so the database is not useful. Of all, I used TRAC, it's T-R-A-C, the Python-based bug tracking system. That's what I used for tracking GPL violations in those days. And I still have the SQLite database. It's this giant database of all these companies, most of them now out of business, that were violating the GPL. And so we picked 14 of them and decided to file a lawsuit. At that time, the Software Freedom Conservancy had started. We started in 2006. So we worked with, we were the home of the BusyBox projects. BusyBox had become part of the SFC. Eric Anderson, who wrote most of the BusyBox code, it's mostly been rewritten these 20 years later, but back then, almost all of the code was copyrighted by Eric. So Eric and SFC sued together. And I just want to make a note here. I'm going to embarrass Denver, so live with it. Denver walked up to me at a conference in early 2009 and said, I just bought a DVD player, and I think it runs Linux, and it doesn't have any source code. And so I took all the details down, and in fact, it ended up being that the lead defendant was Best Buy, which has a house brand called Insignia that was Denver's DVD player. And that's how Denver got involved in GPL enforcement, by courting me in a conference and saying, give me my source code. Aren't you supposed to do that? And eventually I told him, like, you're going to have to do it yourself. Come work for us, and you got to fix this. I've been trying for years. I need some help. So we eventually got compliance from, either the company stopped selling the product in question that was violating, or they came into compliance and released the source code for BusyBox, right? But one of the things we realized was there's this legal concept, again, I'm not a lawyer, but there's a legal concept called standing. And what standing is who has the right to adjudicate an issue, who has standing to file a lawsuit. And the way the standing question works with regard to copyright is the copyright holder has standing if you infringe their copyright to sue. And of course, Eric Anderson and SFC were suing over copyrights in BusyBox. Now, none of these products had just BusyBox. They were all Linux-based devices. They had BusyBox, they had glibc, they had tons of different LGPL and GPL stuff in them. But our leverage was through BusyBox. So in some cases, we ended up getting compliance only for BusyBox. So they gave us the source code of the BusyBox, the ability to reinstall it, but not for Linux and for everything else. And I got really frustrated during the case because I was like, well, but we need everything. Like we can't actually exercise our freedom if they don't comply with the GPL for all works. And so we really started to think at that point. So the lawsuit settled, the last defendant settled out around the 2012, 2013 timeframe. And we started really looking, and at that point Denver had come to work at least part-time for SFC. So Denver and I spent a tremendous amount of time thinking about how to do GPL enforcement. And what we realized was the most important people are not really the developers. I think FOSS in general glorifies and almost deifies the original developers a little bit too much. Developers are important. I used to be a developer. I like developers, I like spending time with developers. I'm so thankful that they release their software under Copyleft licenses, but it's the people that matter. And so the people who use it, the people who get it and want to do something cool with it, and then they can later become upstream developers. When they get the source code and start hacking on it, that's how all of us in the early days became upstream developers. We got Linux, we made a patch, we made an improvement, we gave it back upstream, and that's how Linux and all the other GPL software we rely on today got built, or Copyleft generally, including LGPL. So we really spent the decade of 2013 to the 2017, 2018 timeframe just constantly thinking about what our strategy was to get the rights. And again, this is really the piece that they're going to show me at trial in the Vizio trial. It is true, if you look at my old talks, even from SCaLE, I'm talking about copyright enforcement, copyright this, get the copyright holders together, have the copyright holders do enforcement. But do not take my lack of creativity for a belief that there wasn't other methods available to enforce. And in fact, once we started doing research and talking to legal counsel about it, it was obvious that we should be bringing contract claims, not necessarily, we still want to bring copyright claims sometimes, but the contract claim is much stronger because it is focused on the rights of the people that matter most, the consumer. And I remembered at the time when we finally came around this, I guess it was like circa 2019-ish, 2018-ish timeframe, we really started to focus on this. And I remember this quote that I actually, I quoted part of this in my high school yearbook. So it was a quote I knew well, and I said, yeah, this is what I was doing. I was engaged in a foolish consistency, and it was the hobgoblin of my little mind that I was like, oh, copyright, 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 but there were plenty of other options available, and contract claims were obviously the better option in a lot of cases. So the question is, how does that work? Okay, so it's a copyright license, but it's also a contract at the same time. And again, this is legal details, but it's worth it's kind of diving in here. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but it's important that non-lawyers understand what their rights are and how their system works that they rely on. So copyright is what's called a statutory thing, right? So literally the laws in the United States and other countries as well have this law that says if you generate a creative work and affix it in a tangible medium, as it says, you get certain rights that are defined by law directly. You have the right to decide how people can copy, prepare derivative works, modify the work, redistribute the work, and so forth, and you get to do whatever you want with that. By default, no one else is allowed to do any of those things. Once the work is put into the tangible medium, no one else can copy it, modify it, redistribute it, even necessarily, well, they can read it, but they can't like go on your computer and take it away from you. It's yours until you choose how you're going to license it, right? So then under that exclusive power you have in copyright, you get to choose your license. And what Copyleft licensors have done is they've chosen a license that says, we have this agreement that we want everybody to agree to before they can engage in those activities that we have exclusive rights over. So when you look at the GPL, and again, I want to point out the date on this. In 1991, the GPL was a contract because what it said was, well, copyright controls this work. And it doesn't require you accept my license. You don't have to form a contract, form an agreement with me. But what I'm going to say is, if you make the decision upon seeing my GPL'd or LGPL'd work that you would like to engage in activities governed by copyright, which are my exclusive control as the copyright holder, copying, modifying, redistributing, all those preparing derivative works, then your only permission is this license. That's the only thing that can give you that permission, so you have to accept this license as a contractual agreement when you begin engaging in those activities, and your action of engaging in those activities indicates your consent to this agreement. So that was the epiphany for us to realize this is the strategy, this is the way to approach this. Because in the end, the primary beneficiary that mattered the most under this agreement was not the copyright holder, right? The copyright holder's doing an altruistic thing of sharing their software because they believe in this. And it's not even really the OEM. Now, of course, the OEM of a product receives a license from the copyright holder. They have the permission to copy, modify, and reinstall, but they're just one entity. And the real issue in this policy document is when large groups of people then get distributed the work. And so that OEM is one entity. It has the rights because it got them under the contract from the copyright holder, and then they give it out to the world. And those are the people that matter the most. And as it turns out, the OEM quite oftenly, sneakily often, takes away those rights, gives you a binary-only copy, doesn't give you the source code like the GPL says, doesn't give you the right to recompile it, doesn't give you the right to reinstall it. So what we'll see, and I'll talk a little bit more about the Vizio case in a minute, is that what's happening is that large group of people who can buy the device on some retailer and bring it into their home, they're what's called a third-party beneficiary of the Copyleft agreement. I want to dig a little bit into what that means because it's a legalistic concept, and I'll give you an example. So imagine, you know, I'm trying my best to save for retirement, so I have a little bit of money put away, but one of the things I want to have happen with that money is if something happens to me and my spouse doesn't need the money, I like to go to SFC because I care deeply about the organization where I work, and I won't need the money anymore because I'll be dead. So I'm going to make an agreement with Denver. Denver, would you agree as a contract that I'm going to put some money aside, and would you agree to make sure that that money goes to the SFC? Okay, great. He's agreed. So we have a contract now that I haven't told him the amount yet, but we'll start with $1,000. Definitely, there's $1,000 that's going to be in my estate. You have a right. I want you to make sure to get SFC. So suppose I walk out of here and get hit by one of these. You drive so fast in the greater LA area. It's terrifying. So it's probably get hit by one of those cars, right? So I made this agreement with Denver about this $1,000 from my estate that's supposed to go, and Denver's supposed to do it. But a really scary things happen. As Denver walks out, the ghost of Steve Jobs takes over his brain. And now he hates Copyleft all of a sudden, and he says, you know what, I don't want that $1,000 to go to SFC. I wanted to go to buying a couple of iPhones and I guess you can only buy one iPhone for that, but you can buy half an iPhone. I'm gonna buy half an iPhone and give it to somebody so they use more iPhones because I want them to use more proprietary software. Well, what do we do? Because I made the agreement with Denver. I put let's assume I put the money in some sort of escrowed account where he can get it. And he goes off and does this. Well, the thing is, this agreement you just saw me and Denver make, SFC, our employer and separate entity, is a third-party beneficiary of that agreement. So SFC would have the right to sue the now possessed body of Denver, of Steve Jobs' ghost, and say, no, we don't care that you were possessed by Steve Jobs. Denver made an agreement, and you're in his body, so you have to. I don't know if there's much case law about ghost possession, so there's a little bit of like a hypothetical here. But they're saying, well, no, Denver, as a legal person, you are required to give that money to SFC, even though we didn't even know about the agreement. Like, I didn't tell our board or Karen, our executive director, about this agreement. We just made this up now. But because they are a third-party beneficiary, once they're aware of that agreement, they have the right to, and standing, as I mentioned, to file a lawsuit against Denver to demand that $1,000 back for SFC. Even though they were not even the SFC is an entity, the board, Karen as the executive director, weren't even here, didn't even know we made the agreement. So we've begun doing work in this direction. Denver talked in his keynote about this AVM lawsuit. That's focused on the LGPL, which is a very important license as well, and has some interesting aspects to it that we're really excited about, and we're doing more looking at LGPL enforcement as well. And Sebastian went in as a consumer who had bought the AVM device. And we've basically adjudicated this issue in Germany. Now, it's not as exciting as it sounds because Germany is not a precedent-based system. They're not a common law system like the US, the UK, and Australia. They're a civil law system, so civil lawsuits do not actually set precedents. So it's a little bit harder in Germany because you can't set a precedent. It's like each case is sort of its own contained thing. But in this contained case, AVM gave up fighting with Sebastian. They allowed him and us to publish how to recompile, reinstall the LGPL on the device in question, and they even paid his legal fees and agreed with the court to pay his legal fees, basically admitting their guilt. They will tell you they didn't admit their guilt, but they admitted their guilt. And ultimately did the right thing, which is important to mention, that they did share the software they were supposed to share, although they should have done it from the start and they shouldn't have fought Sebastian for so long. Now, you've heard all day now at this point about the Vizio lawsuit. And what we did is we were looking for devices we could use at the SFC to do things. And I was very interested in the fact that all these TVs had Linux-based firmwares, but they're mainly to run like proprietary streaming services. And I'm like, what I want to do, like I had this vision of TVs mounted around my house, and so people want to do video chat all the time. I don't like video chat. I mean, we use Big Blue Button, there's also Jitsi, is open source and free software. So, but even when it's open source, I design my life around the idea of working from home so I could clean the kitchen while on conference calls. And this video chat thing, I have to sit there and my kitchen's no longer clean ever since video chat became a big thing. So a lot of times I just dial in and then I'm not on video and I'm really go, Bradley, you're not on video, and all that stuff. So what I'd like to do is mount TVs running Linux around my house and then be able to just put the BBB window up on all these different machines. So if I'm standing in the kitchen cleaning, I can be like, hi, I'm on the kitchen cleaning, but I'm here listening, So that was what I was thinking would be cool to do. So we bought these Vizio TVs, but they were all violating the GPL. And it was really annoying too because Denver had already done a bunch of work years before to enforce the license against them. We really flagged for them that they were violating the license. And in the next generation, the license violations were even worse. They had redone their firmware, but it was completely violating the GPL and LGPL on dozens of products, dozens of upstream projects. If you look at our complaint, there's a whole laundry list that we told the court about of GPL and LGPL programs that appeared. And we told the court in Vizio, while technically we are a copyright holder in many of these works, not all of them, but many of the works we have some copyrights in that are mentioned, but we didn't seek our standing through being a copyright holder. We sought our standing as we bought a bunch of TVs to do an interesting project. They were violating the GPL. We couldn't do our interesting project, so we would like our third-party beneficiary right under the license from all the works that are in there under the GPL and LGPL to get the complete corresponding source code and the right to copy, modify, recompile, and reinstall that software. Vizio has basically no interest in giving us that, so the lawsuit continues. How many people are local to California? Oh, most people in the room. I want to ask you a favor. Denver already asked, I'm going to ask again. If you can schedule your vacation or time off from work, I know it's a lot to ask to give up a week of vacation to do this, but think about it. You got time to think about it. It starts Monday, September 15th. It's Orange County. It's not that far. I mean, it probably takes 3 hours to drive there because of traffic around here, but you can get there a reasonable amount of time. And please come. The courtroom that we're in, I assume it's going to be in Judge Statton's court that we've been in for some of the hearings. There's only about 30 seats. I think it would be amazing if we got 50 people to show up so it's standing room only, because one of the things we've found in the case is that Vizio's argument is there's nobody who cares about this. You all are just irritants that are just trying to make trouble. And we would really like to show the whole court that there are people that care about their right to modify and reinstall Linux on Linux-based devices, and having people in the court you don't have to, like Denver said, be silent in your support. Just sitting there watching, listening, being present those kind of things make a difference. They show, and if nothing else, it will make Vizio nervous because they'll say, wow, we were wrong. People really do care about this issue. So help us show them that they're wrong, because we know they are. and come to the case if you can. I know it's a lot to ask. I mean, I know some people only get 2 weeks vacation from the job, but we'd love to have you there. And I will make the case that, I mean, there are a lot of court TV shows in the world for a reason, right? Courtroom is a drama environment, and it's fun to watch drama, right? People watch it all the time. Like how many TV shows have fake lawsuits on them every day? So come and watch it. It'll be about things you care about. It'll be interesting. There'll be lots of technical detail in some of the testimony. I think it will be an enjoyable week. So I ask you to come and ask all your friends to come and watch our website. We think the trial date is set now permanently. It's got delayed a few times, but watch our website for changes and so forth. But please think about coming. So we've got some time left. I never started my timer, so I don't know how. I told the organizer here that I had a timer, which I just realized I never started. So I now have to ask for time to be tracked retroactively, and I apologize for that. But I think there should be a lot of time left, right?
We've got 25 minutes.
25 minutes, great, for Q&A. So I will reset this timer for 25 minutes. So then now it'll actually work. Apologize for that. Oops, that's the wrong button. And Denver's here as well, and so we're both. I know that probably people had more questions they wanted to ask during the keynote. So you can ask me or Denver questions about either of our talks, and we're just glad to take any question or issue about SFC, our work, GPL enforcement, Copyleft, anything you want to ask. We're welcome to just open it up to discussion now.
So I'm going to actually be walking around because we have this mic for others as well. So I'll be answering questions if you ask them while I'm standing beside you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bradley, for your work with your historical work with the Free Software Foundation and the SFC and all of your free software contributions. I really appreciate it. In the work in the successes that you've had, getting manufacturers to release source code for their devices under the GPL, what have you seen as the long-term effects of that? Like, the ideal state is that manufacturers continue to release source code for their products with new versions and new products that they release. But a potential alternative is they might seek other software where they're not obligated to release source code. What have you seen as the long-term effect for manufacturers?
I have a really fun anecdote to answer that question with, which is so that 2003 enforcement against Linksys. We felt it was very successful. We had a very complex and tense negotiation with Linksys, but really Broadcom was the aggressor and the problem, and Linksys really wanted to release the source code. And as soon as they got the source code from Broadcom, or at least I thought, as soon as I got the source code from Broadcom, sans the wireless driver, they released it. There was a big Slashdot story, which was the big news site in those days, less popular now, and people were downloading and OpenWRT started. And so about a week after that finished, I called Sherman Chu, who later moved, because Cisco had just bought Linksys about 6 months before the violation started. So the product had been developed by Linksys as an independent entity, and then they were bought by Cisco, and the thing was already in production. And so I called Sherman Chu, who at the time was like in the general counsel's office. I think he was associate general counsel or something of Cisco, and really to take a victory lap with him. Like I said, hey Sherman, just giving you a call. Like I know this was contentious, painful, but we got the right result. I think it's going to be great for Linksys long term, for the brand. I was right, by the way, because that thing is still for sale, the WRT54G, because so many people, well, before the OpenWRT1, now the OpenWRT1 should be the one as it is named, but until the OpenWRT1, WRT54G was the one people knew. I can run OpenWRT on that, it will work. And so they still produce that under the Linksys brand. So I was totally right when I said that to Sherman. And Sherman said to me, this has been a horrible process. You and all you open source people are horrible. I've made a rule inside Cisco and Linksys that we will never, ever use GPL software again. And if you do some research, you'll find that from around like the 2004, mid-2004 to the 2006 timeframe, every Linksys router that was produced used VxWorks, which is a proprietary alternative for embedded operating systems. And then when you start to look at the 2008, 2009 timeframe, all of a sudden Linux starts showing up again, violating the GPL again. And I know I have many sources inside companies. I appreciate those of you who work inside companies and are sleeper agents is going a bit far, but you know, secretly really support free software, but you're working for some proprietary company. I know a lot of you, and if you, you know, I keep sources confidential, but I had plenty of sources inside Linksys and Cisco, and what was happening was the engineers were like, VxWorks doesn't work. Like, we can't build wireless routers on this, so they started sneaking Linux back in, and because Sherman had made this foolish edict, they were violating the GPL again, because instead of creating a system whereby, okay, we're going to make sure when we use Linux, we do the right thing, and we make sure the source code's available and so forth, it doesn't hurt our business, as proved by the WRT-54G. Instead, they made this silly rule that no Linux allowed, and they got themselves in trouble again, and got sued by the FSF over it, because they just didn't do the right thing. That they should have. So in my opinion, that's the only time I've really seen on a massive scale a company say, nope, we're not going to do GPL anymore because we don't like, you know, we're not going to give this source code and stuff. And it completely backfired for them. And to this day, Linksys has been sold and resold. It's not owned by Cisco anymore. But there are Cisco products that include GPL stuff. There are Linksys products that include GPL stuff. Many of them still do violate. From time to time. I can't give you a litany of which ones don't do and which ones don't violate. But it's not like they stopped using Linux. What they did instead is they decided, you know what? There's like only a few people, like Bradley, Denver, Karen Sandler, out there enforcing the GPL in this little tiny org called the SFC. Let's just crush them, and then we can get away with violating GPL forever. And we faced lots of efforts by the industry to put us out of business so that they could just willy-nilly violate the GPL. So I think that's really was the strategy. It was not switch to other stuff. It was, how do we crush these people who want their rights? Like, let's just make sure consumers don't have rights. That's the answer. Deborah, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent example there of why it's just not possible. I mean, developers have made all of this excellent software exactly because of the license, because they can share and contribute and collaborate, and that a company can't shut it down later because they can't proprietarize it. And so I think that's why they're scared, because people have rights. Developers are making great software, and they know that all the great software, like Linux and stuff, is under Copyleft licenses.
Hey, so I just wanted to add that they did a change, but they also released the 54GL, because the original version had 4 megabytes of RAM. When they went to VNext, they had 2 megabytes of RAM, and then they released the GL, which was the one that had the L basically, but meant for Linux, came back to 4 again. I only know that because I was on the receiving end and like, oh, why they change it? So I had to look for the GL specifically.
Yeah. Well, and I remember that. I remember that change, and that was after my conversation with Sherman Chu and so forth. And it was like, well, and I agree with you. They put the L in there to like signal that it ran Linux and that it worked. And it was all because of what happened in the enforcement that it did, and it worked. And so it's just so funny to me that, I mean, there must, and I've talked to my sources. I have a really good source who used to work for Linksys, doesn't anymore, but did during much of that era, and said like it was their bestseller. It was always their bestseller. For years and years after the enforcement. I mean, we turned it by doing enforcement into their bestseller, and I'm sure they made millions on that darn thing. And it's sort of like, well, you made millions on a device that was in compliance. Like, why are you still violating the GPL on other products? It doesn't make any sense other than a desire to control consumers and to have power, as Denver talked about, over consumers, which the consumer should be in the power, not the manufacturers.
I see some companies moving, like switching from a copyleft to a copyright, like say, I think, I may be mistaking this, but like say HashiCorp with like Terraform. I don't know where I'm actually going with this question, but one of the things is like I assume that move means that they don't use anything upstream, or
Well, what's tended to happen in open source, and I gave a talk about this, I'm trying to remember what year it was at SCaLE. I gave a talk about that issue of sort of the, what I've sometimes called the uncoordinated conspiracy to discredit Copyleft that the for-profit industry did, which includes like a big keynote by the GitHub founder at OSCON in like 2007 or so, to basically say that Copyleft's bad license, it's bad for business, don't use Copyleft, only use non-Copyleft licenses. So that is a zeitgeist that the employers have been able to generate. And around that time frame, late 2000s, early 2010s, I started to have developers come up to me to say, I'd like to use Copyleft, but my employer just won't touch anything Copyleft. Yet they still use Linux, right? I mean, that's sort of funny because it's like what operating system is all this stuff running on? It's almost surely a Linux-based system. But as far as like, and that's one of the reasons why I feel, and I talked about this in that talk years ago, why we kind of lost the user space, right? Because I kind of look as we played to stalemate on the operating system because like the Linux is the most popular operating system kernel, and it's widely used, and it's GPL'd, and a lot of the mid-level software, systemd, glibc, GCC, and all that stuff are under GPL as well, but when you go up another level in the stack, you see mostly either non-copyleft software or proprietary. And I think that's from industry pressure, right? I mean, people saw that copyleft was something that might cause them to have to work harder to make money. Like, and that's the funny thing is, right, it's just easier to make money with proprietarized software, and it's easier to deal with a license that doesn't put any requirements on you as a business. But that doesn't mean it's the right policy. Right? It's for the world. It's just the right policy for those who want to maximize profits over user rights. And so our proposal is like, we have obvious examples like the WRT54G of projects that, sorry, Denver, I forgot. It's Denver's laptop, because I don't have HDMI on mine because I'm still VGA only, because it's the last laptop model you can buy that, or get used that is 100% free software. So Denver's laptop with his blob, Denver's lent me his blobs, proprietary blobs to be able to present. But yeah, so I think that's really what's I see happening there, is that was really a concerted effort by companies to convince people to license things under non-copyleft licenses so that they have more options, which is true, but those options are bad for user rights. So I don't support the idea of running away from copyleft, even though I understand why these companies want to do it. Denver, do you have anything you want to add to that? You don't have to. I'm just offering the opportunity.
No, I'm good. Yeah, looks like there's another question here. You said it very well, by the way.
Thank you.
To add on to what this person was asking, I think an important aspect of what we're seeing with the moves those companies are making is that these projects start out as open source projects, but they impose a SCaLE, a contributor license agreement, on everybody that contributes to the project. And that gives them the ability to then relicense all of those contributions at a later date. So I think what unfortunately we are starting to see a lot of, and we have seen in the last 5 or so years, is projects that start that have even fairly strict copyleft licenses like the AGPL, but they also enforce a SCaLE for all contributions. And it's really a mistreatment of copyleft licenses, because it takes away the rights from the people contributing software and and centralizes all the rights in the company that is the primary developer.
Yeah, thank you for making that point, because it's a very good one. And if you search, I think if you search for the 2 words copyleft equality, you will find my main essay on this very issue, because you're exactly right in what you're describing. What happened? One of the collateral damage with regard to copyleft was the realization by some of these companies that what they could engage in is called proprietary relicensing. So what they're able to do, if they've used the SCaLE to gather up all the rights, because they have all the rights, like I was talking about the copyright holder, and I said original developer was an estimation, that, like you're sort of asking about that. When a single entity collects up all those copyrights and that entity is a bad actor, or just a avarice-motivated for-profit actor, they say, well, you know what we can do is we can sell separate proprietary licenses. And then they took it another step. And that in itself is like seedy, but not disaster. The disaster step that all of these companies always engage in, MySQL being the first one to do it, which is now the Oracle is doing this process for the MySQL code base, is they said, well, you know what? If we overread the GPL and tell people they're violating when they aren't, like MySQL literally would go to customers, which are really just shakedowns, and say, oh, if you write an SQL statement and you happen to run it on a MySQL server, that's a derivative work under copyright of the MySQL server. I mean, completely asinine argument. And therefore, you have to buy a proprietary license to MySQL. You can't use the GPL version. And that became a business model that a lot of these companies used. And so some companies have doubled down on this. MongoDB is a great example where the AGPL was not even strict enough for them to do the business model they want. So they wrote a different license called the SSGPL. And what it does is it has a clause that no one but MongoDB couldn't even comply with. If they didn't have the CLA, they would not be able to comply because it says everything in the entire stack, all the way down to the operating system, has to be under SSPL. And I don't know about you, but I haven't seen any operating systems released under SSPL lately. So you can't actually run it on Linux legally. You have to buy the proprietary license from MongoDB. So these kinds of behaviors are just abhorrent. And I've talked about this for like 15 years, and it's really hard to educate people because it's a complex question. Because the license on the surface, I mean, SSPL aside, it's AGPL or GPL, but you kind of have to look at the governance model. My colleague Richard Fontana at Red Hat coined this term called inbound equals outbound as a method for governance of an open source project. And what that means is everybody who is inbound to the project gets the same license as everybody outbound. So what that means is if you get a GPL'd work, you keep your own copyrights when you write, and you have to license everybody else's copyrights under GPL and then contribute your under GPL even though you keep the copyright. And that creates an equality-based system where every contributor has equal rights and every contributor is bound to every other contributor by the GPL contractual agreement. What the CLAs are doing that you're talking about is they're saying, well, no, we want to use this as our outbound license, the AGPL or GPL, but our inbound is a different agreement entirely that gives us all the power. And that's really the problem. But explaining that nuance, which you clearly understand because you're pointing right to the issue, but it's really hard to explain that nuance to folks. So, and afterwards, if anybody has ideas of like other advocacy ways to explain that nuance, I'm open to them because I've tried lots of them, and still, it's just one of these things where people's eyes start to glaze over, like, but it's still GPL'd, right? And they just, it's like, it's too much level of detail. And that's in fact what these companies are relying on, because they go out and say, oh, we have a GPL project. And it's like, no, you don't, not really. They're like, oh, it's GPL, look at the license of the repository. It's like, well, yeah, but look at the contributing.md file. That is important too. Anything you want to add to that, Denver?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to know about. I would say that we do, you should look at that when you're contributing to a project, see if it has that property. I don't know if there's an easy way of categorizing these or otherwise, but yeah, if you're thinking of using something or like hitching your business to something, like check that out to see if that's an issue, because this has happened before with distributions that are trying to distribute this software. It's like, oh, well, we have this thing in our repository of software because it's licensed this way, and then like next release, it's not there because they changed the license and they can't include it anymore. And so, but if you have something that's multi-copyright holder held with no CLA, then that's not going to happen, and you will be able to use it for a long time. So I think getting people to understand what makes true resilience in software freedom happen is really important, and I look forward to finding new ways of doing that, but for now you need to look carefully at projects you are planning to use.
We have about 5 minutes left, so we have some more time for more questions.
The previous question mentioned the AGPL, and it seems there are some licenses that have the reputation as being a strict license. So I wanted to ask if you could clarify, among these quote-unquote strict licenses, what are the differences among them?
Very good question. So the GPL was designed, as we put up, and actually the first version of GPL was 1989, the GPL v2 was 1991, long before we understood what the internet was going to look like in 2025 or even 2010. And so it focused the copyleft trigger on distribution. So under GPL, if you have a copy of a GPL software on your own machine and you don't give anyone a copy of either a binary or the source code of that software, you have relatively few obligations under the GPL. So just because somebody knows you have GPL software inside your business, as an example, they can't come knock on your door and say, give me the source code. You'll say, well, I never distributed that to anybody, so I don't have to give it to you. Even if I made changes, like if you make private changes to Linux or GCC under GPL, you're allowed to keep those private. What the Affero clause, which I'll take the credit that I invented the Affero clause. The Affero clause was designed to handle the problem that we were starting to see as what we used to call AJAX or the Web 2.0 era back in 2004, 2005 came about, where we saw, well, wait a second, if folks are running software on a server and there's a complex service being provided, because remember, in the 90s, a website was just HTML, mostly with a tiny bit of JavaScript, and JavaScript almost did nothing in those days. So suddenly we're saying, wow, there's these complex software applications. Some of it's done in JavaScript, which of course is distributed. So if you could GPL the JavaScript, and then when the JavaScript comes in your browser, you have a right to get source code. But the JavaScript's making callbacks to this stuff on the server, and even if that stuff on the server is GPL'd, it has not been distributed to you. So you can't demand the source code for the server-side stuff under GPL. What Affero GPL's added, and some people do call this stricter because it's an extra requirement that's not present in the GPL, is the copyleft requirements. Instead of triggering on distribution, they trigger on deployment. So if you give someone access to a website that is running Affero GPL code, the person with the access to the website also has a contractual right to ask for the source code and get it from you. As opposed to if it were GPL, they wouldn't have that right. So that's the difference. And some people will call the Affero GPL the strictest copyleft because it has this extra requirement. I mean, strict is an interesting word. Like, it's stricter in its defense of user rights, is what I would say. A lot of people who criticize it say as Tom Preston Warner of GitHub said in his famous keynote criticizing copyleft, he said, the GPL and AGPL are a license of restrictions. It's just more restrictions. Well, one person's restrictions are policy requirements to adhere to users' rights. I mean, I guess we could call it a restriction that we can't murder people. But I'm pretty glad we have a law that says we're not allowed to do that. Denver, you want anything to that?
No, I'm good.
Okay, we have time for one more question. I think we have 2 minutes left.
I work for a company where they blacklist basically GPL-style code bases.
So they don't use Linux at all?
They have a list. They say if you want to use this list, you have to go talk to the lawyers,
Right,
and it's
yeah.
going to be a pain. So, do you have any recommendations on like how to advocate for like liberalizing that policy, or like people I could talk to who've done that in their companies, like that kind of thing?
My mic's dead. Did I turn it off? No. Battery might be dead. I don't think it's all. We're almost done. I'll use this one. I'll just take it off to make sure we don't get feedback. So So the question, to start over since I wasn't mic'd, I've arranged my life to work for nonprofit charities. I last worked for a for-profit company in 1996. I've worked for only nonprofit organizations since then. So I struggle to understand what it's like in for-profit companies and I mean, people tell me about it. I talk to lots of people who work for for-profits, but I'm not the best person to give that advice simply because I don't know what your life is like inside a for-profit. And I think it's probably pretty painful. My life's painful in different ways at nonprofits. The only good advice my dad ever gave me was when you switch jobs, you trade one set of problems for an entirely different set of problems. So I have the nonprofit problems, not the for-profit problems. I think the best thing to do in any negotiation, because it's just a negotiation, is to stay steadfast and think about your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, and really push. And if you can find GPL code bases that are going to make the product so much better, that's always the best way to go and say, look, I'm going to spend 6 months re-implementing this because GPL or LGPL code base would solve it. That's why it's so important for people to volunteer to write LGPL and GPL code base, like Linux, which was primarily written by volunteers, at least its earliest versions, because the Copyleft works best when there's a code base that's so seductive. That's why I made that joke about do they use Linux, right? Because Linux is so seductive because it's such a good operating system kernel that people just can't live without it. They're willing to put up with the fact that it's Copyleft just to get Linux. And if the code base isn't that good, in the end, they're going to use something else. But we need lots of good code bases. That's the front load to Copyleft of writing those kind of things. Anyway, I think we're out of time. I do want to ask you to please donate to SFC. We're a nonprofit charity. It's a tax-deductible donation in the U.S. Please become a sustainer. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, Bradley, for coming up here. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Denver, for helping out, of course. Really appreciate it here in the talk.
Please do come by our booth. You can see the OpenWRT1. And we don't do branded masks because masks are different, but we do have branded hand sanitizer if you would like one at our booth right in the trade show floor. Thank you so much for coming to my talk.
All right, everybody, coming up next in this Ballroom G, we're going to have James Wong talking RamaLama, making AI boring. So please come back after the break.
Let me get packed up tonight. I always like to clear the space for the next speaker. I hate it when the previous speaker is in my way, so I try not to do that to someone else. So.
Check, check 1, 2. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2, check 1, 2.
And I'm sorry, we had some behind the screen here yesterday. I think
Oh,
someone
and then they're not there
reclaimed
anymore.
maybe.
Okay. I'll leave some there.
You shouldn't. No,
Just so.
this will be the last talk. This next
Oh,
one
this is the
coming
last
up.
one? Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
All right, we're going to be getting started in about 2 minutes now. So really quickly, before James starts his talk today, I just want to do a quick shout out here. I know you guys are aware sponsors are a big part of what makes SCaLE such a great event, gives us the opportunity to put on such a great event for everybody. One of the sponsors here today that we wanted to shout out to was Rocky Linux. For those who don't know, Rocky Linux is an open source enterprise operating system designed to be 100% bug-for-bug compatible with RHEL. If you'd like additional information on it, you can find them out on the expo floor. They have booth 304. Okay, so please be sure to check them out. Okay, and another one here. As a reminder, you are at SCaLE 22, which is I'm sure where everybody wants to be. You are in the Ballroom G, which is general sessions, general information sessions. So if you were looking for a developer track or a kernel track, you might want to check your schedule again or hit one of the boards up front. What we have now, our next talk is going to be RamaLama, Making AI Boring, presented by James Huang. James is a senior product manager focusing on high performance computing and AI with Red Hat. In today's talk, he'll share information on the RamaLama project and its goal of making work with AI boring through the use of OCI containers. We will have time for question and answers at the end. For the questions, we do ask that you give us a second to bring the microphone to you. Since we're recording it, if you ask a question without the mic, the viewers won't be able to hear it. So bear with us while we get to you. And then everybody, please welcome James.
Hello, can you hear me? All right, perfect. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I know it's the last slot of the day on the last day, so hope everybody had a great SCaLE conference. As mentioned, I'm here to talk today about an exciting new project that we're working on here at Red Hat called RamaLama. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make AI boring. And hopefully through this talk, I'll share with you about how we're trying to do that. So really quickly about myself, as mentioned, I'm a product manager at Red Hat for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. I manage the high performance computing and AI offerings for RHEL. But prior to Red Hat, I was actually a chip designer, a chip design engineer, worked in computer networking, industrial automation, did spend a little time doing neurotech medical device prototyping. So if any of those things are of interest to you, I love kind of chatting about those topics. So please feel free to come up afterwards and chat with me about those if those are interesting to you. So I think there's a lot of AI is a really interesting space right now, right? I think there's a lot to be excited about, a tremendous amount of innovation, right? I also think that there's a lot of aspects of AI that are maybe negative exciting or negative fun. So things like the technology stack kind of is really hard to use or hard to get up and running or breaks consistently. Things around kind of security, data privacy, right? This kind of these surprises of like, hey, surprise, X, Y, or Z was using data that they didn't have access to or didn't have permission for. And so with RamaLama, we want to put everyone in that top right-hand quadrant of help you to experience the excitement and the fun of AI, but limit maybe some of the, where possible, the negative exciting and negative fun sides of it. So what is RamaLama? RamaLama is an easy, secure, and open way to run and serve large language models locally. And it's all done the container way. So I want to get a kind of quick show of hands. Raise your hand if you've ever experimented with a large language model, so play with the ChatGPT or whatnot. I think that's most folks, right? Okay, hands down. Have you ever run a large language model locally? So have you run it on your local machine, a laptop or whatnot? Cool. Most folks. Hands down. Raise your hand if you've built an AI-powered application. And what I mean by that is like an application that has a generative AI model in it. Yeah, a few folks. Great. So I think RamaLama has a lot here for you, whichever stage you're at, and we hope to make it easy, secure, and open. How does RamaLama make it easy to use? Well, with one simple command on the command line, RamaLama is a command line tool. You can run or serve a chatbot. So, a couple months ago, many of us have heard about the news around DeepSeek and, amazing new technology, as well as kind of a lot of questions about how they built the model, how they used, their accelerators. For me, at least, I was very curious about okay, well, what is this thing, right? Well, with one easy-to-use command, RamaLama run DeepSeek, you can check it out for yourself and see what this model has to offer. The second piece is that it's secure, so you can experiment with these large language models while keeping your data private. And I think this is a really big thing, because when I talk to customers, or I talk to even just kind of friends casually about where their organizations are at, in terms of using this really great technology to make us more productive or help us with our work, I hear a lot of folks say yeah, we're still trying to figure it out, or we're very sensitive to exposing our organization's data, especially to a cloud service or an AI service. And so in using RamaLama, or a tool like RamaLama, and running it locally, you can know and have confidence that your data is not leaking out to someone that you don't want to give it to, right? And then finally, RamaLama is open, so it's built using open standards and AI building blocks. It leverages a lot of kind of the existing ecosystem of open source technologies that exist in the AI space that's driving a lot of innovation, and also kind of makes it accessible to many of us. And so RamaLama really leans into that open source ethos and those building blocks to make it easy to run. So now I want to talk a little bit about why we built it on containers, and the reason why I bring this up is not to necessarily I love talking about containers, even though containers are great, but it's more so that it kind of explains why we think RamaLama is a really great, easy, secure, and open solution. So first and foremost, it's built on a container engine. So and you can use Podman, you can use Docker, whichever container engine that you like. What this means is that RamaLama is actually available and usable on any operating system platform of your choice. So you could run it on Mac OS, you could run it on Windows, you could run it on any flavor of Linux. Today, RamaLama is packaged in Fedora. It's also available in the Apple repository for Red Hat Enterprise Linux users. So that wide availability is, we think is really great. And then the second is that, it pulls in, so RamaLama pulls in the relevant container image. And why this matters is because, it's really kind of hard to get this stack up and running, right? And so it will pull in a relevant container based on, which accelerator stack, or if you don't have an accelerator, what is the most appropriate kind of configuration for your system, and just abstracts that complexity for you away so that you don't have to worry about it, right? You can just worry about, hey, I just want to try this model, and that's great. And then finally, you can take that model and the whole stack of that you want to run or serve as an API endpoint, and deploy it to an OCI container registry. OCI is Open Container Initiative. It's like a set of standards for containers. And we think that a lot of organizations basically already have adopted this sort of practice for containers. And we want to make it such that it's like, okay, well, plug into the world that you already know. Let's not go and create something new. And lean into the container registries that you already are very familiar with. Okay, so I want to take you back to a time, because I know most folks here have already experimented with large language models, but I want to take you back to a time when maybe you were still learning about it, right? If you can think back to maybe years ago, or maybe that's even fairly recently, and like when you were really curious about what this technology had to offer and you wanted to try it out for yourself. Well, one of the first things that you may find is that, so you may have heard of Hugging Face, which is like one of the most popular model registries that are out there. A model registry, you could think of it as basically like GitHub, but for models, right? So it's a public place where people can post the models that they want to make available and share with other folks. So you may have heard of, like, say, the IBM Granite model, and you're like, hey, okay, I want to go to Hugging Face, I want to get that model, and you go and look it up. And I know this situation happened to me not long ago. I was like, okay, go find Granite on Hugging Face, and then you find pages upon pages of different variants of the Granite model. And there's different quantization methods, there's like different parameter sizes, alignment techniques. And for someone who is just getting started, right, like that can be really intimidating. Which one of these should I use? Like, I have no idea. I have no idea what any of these things mean. Like, why does it feel like I need to be an AI researcher in order to be able to try this out? Well, with RamaLama short names, we make that really easy. So for example, you can see here, like, you can run RamaLama run Granite, and it'll pull the most common version of Granite, of the Granite model. And it's just that easy. You don't have to think about all these different permutations and of techniques and variants that exist. So you can just try it out as quickly as possible. But of course we know, like, these techniques matter, and these like different kind of parameter models matter as well. And so of course you can provide it kind of the full path of a very specific model that you want to use. But especially in the early days, we want to make it less intimidating, more accessible to folks. The second piece is, we really want to make performance easy, right? And so you shouldn't have to be an expert in, the accelerator stack in order to take advantage of the hardware that you have. So for example, if you don't have an accelerator, like it's, we think that it's like out of the box easy to use with RamaLama. So it'll do kind of like CPU inferencing. So it'll basically run it just purely against your CPU. If you do have an accelerator though, and you've installed the kernel driver, but maybe you haven't set up the other user mode drivers for your accelerator, or maybe it's not working, RamaLama will auto-detect that and choose the open source accelerator stack, which gives you pretty good performance. But then of course, like if you kind of we're able to get past the the scalpers and afford the thousands of dollars for a GPU, right? You want to be able to take maximum advantage of that hardware that you purchased, right? And so if the accelerator stack is kind of all set up, then RamaLama will lean into that and pull in the container that's vendor specific with that stack to make the maximum use of your hardware. So all this happens under the covers, and you shouldn't have to think about it. So you can just kind of get up and running quickly. So as you're experimenting, right, you may be wondering, well, I feel kind of uncomfortable with this. I think there's kind of there, rightly so, is maybe some like questions or skepticism about like security in this space, right? Particularly around your data. And RamaLama kind of has two main ways that it addresses this. The first is, as I mentioned, it's local, right? So you're not giving your data to a cloud service or an AI as a service, right? Where you don't have to wonder, like, are they taking that data and doing something with it? That's the first piece. But the second piece is that because RamaLama is built on containers, what that means is that there's tighter control and isolation of the workload. So you can actually explicitly control the privilege levels of the application itself that's running the AI model, and also tightly control and explicitly control, if it has any access to the external network, right? Which I think is really powerful. For those who are kind of familiar with this space, a lot of people kind of question about AI, like, oh, is it going to become Skynet, right? Like Skynet from the Terminator movies, where it's like it becomes sentient and like kind of takes over the world, right? I like to joke that like, we can thwart Skynet by keeping it in a container, right? So keeping it isolated and in a container, and it won't ever get out. And the Terminator movie never happens. Okay, so RamaLama is, we really lean into open source here. And what that really means is that, there's kind of a lot of different standards, a lot of pieces of the stack that are constantly evolving and emerging. And we want to give kind of maximum choice to users in this space, because we know that what existed in this space 2 years ago is not kind of what exists today. And what exists today, in a couple years, probably will be different from a couple years from now, right? And so with RamaLama, we enable that modularity where you can kind of swap in and out these pieces, supported by the community, and therefore you can use kind of different blocks depending on what your needs are. So what this means is like you can access, the OLAMA model registries, Hugging Face model registry, OCI container registry, or something that we don't know about yet, right? And then similarly with the inference runtime, you can use Llama CPP or VLLM or Whisper CPP or some other inference engine that we don't know about yet, right? That will emerge in the coming years. So, so now so you've experimented, great, and it looks good. Now you want to build an AI-powered application. What might that look like with RamaLama? Well, with RamaLama Serve, you can serve the model with standard APIs. So today, that is, a lot of the industry has kind of started to coalesce around OpenAI's REST APIs. And these are kind of a standard set of APIs that people use to kind of engage with the model, model API endpoints. And then in the future, we're looking to integrate with Llama Stack as well, which will, basically connects the front and back ends together and will make the integration of an AI application even easier. So that's something that we're looking to in the future. And then if you're building this application, you want to be able to get to production, right? Well, RamaLama can automatically generate a quadlet for you for single node inferencing. Or if you're trying to get to Kubernetes, it will generate the Kubernetes YAML file for you so that you can get to Kubernetes really easily without having to be an expert in the space. So now I'm just going to kind of go through a really quick demo that I had put together. And it's a scripted demo, so you don't have to watch me fumble through typing the commands. So, all right, let's see if I can expand it a little bit. Maybe that's a little bit too large. Okay. All right, so you can see I'm running version 0.6.2 of RamaLama. This is actually a virtual machine of Red Hat Enterprise Linux version 9.5 on my MacBook. You could obviously run this on Mac, but we're at Linux Expo, so I wanted to show it on Linux, right? And the first thing that I want to show you is, so this is the configuration of RamaLama. You can see that I'm running it on an ARM64 CPU. And what I really wanted to kind of point your attention to is, you can see at the bottom over here, it's using this image, which is from Quay.io. It's the default RamaLama image. The runtime is Llama CPP. And this is the directory that it stores basically any models that you may pull down from. So it's my local directory. It's using a container, so use container is true, and the version is 0.6.2. Okay, so next, I'm going to show you, like, really quickly, and hopefully the network holds up for this, is I'm going to pull a model from the RamaLama model registry. So I'm going to delete it first so we know it's not there, and then again, hopefully the wireless holds up here. Let's see. Not bad. Okay, so it's going to take 5 seconds. Great. So we're pulling this model, which is called like small m or small LLM. It's 135 million parameter model, just something really small, right, where you can just really quickly try it out. Of course, I think most people are going to be pulling models that are larger than this, probably in the billions of parameters, but I don't think you guys want to sit here for the next 10 minutes watching me download it. So, so we're going to use this small LLM. 135 million. And then you can see with this command RamaLama ls, you can see, or RamaLama list, you can see that we pulled it from the RamaLama model registry 27 seconds ago. It's 87 megs. Pretty straightforward, right? And you can see that, what am I running? I'm running this, like the default RamaLama image, as I had mentioned, right? Okay, so next what I'm going to do is, I'm going to show you, like take you behind the curtains and like kind of show you the underlying command that RamaLama is running. And the reason why I want to show you this is because I think it kind of illustrates what I described before about the value of containers for RamaLama. So first and foremost, you can see that the command is Podman, right? It's using the Podman container engine. And the second is it's running that default Quay.io RamaLama container. The next thing I'm going to show you, and again, these are all the same command, and I'm just highlighting different portions for you to see. The next one is you can see that in this command, we're basically keeping the privileged or the privileges to be like very low. So basically, not giving the container many access or privileges to the local system. And then finally, with this -- network none, it really doesn't even have access to the external network. So I think just more assurance that like, hey, if you're very sensitive to like data privacy, security, kind of wonder what this may be doing to your machine, like have the confidence that it's in a container and it's isolated. So next I'm going to run the IBM Granite 2 billion parameter model real quick. And so I mean, keep in mind, this is running on a VM on my MacBook, right? So like this is only using that hardware. And I mean, you can see, just type a simple hello. Like it performs like pretty well. It's not bad for a 2 billion parameter model. For a lot of folks, again, you may want to use, depending on what your hardware is capable of doing, you'll probably want to use a larger model. But for the sake of this demo, I think a 2 billion parameter is enough. So next, we're going to convert this into OCI content, and so you'll see, ran that RamaLama convert command, and then you can see that there's a new image. For this small LLM, created just moments ago, right? The next thing we're going to do is we're going to generate the Kubernetes YAML file. So when you want to go to that kind of like scaled, production deployment, making it really easy to do, right? And you can see here, this is the Kubernetes YAML file. So next, I'm going to show you how you can basically create a quadlet for creating a single node inference server, and these are just basically the artifacts that you would need for that as well, right? This is the volume file, the image file, the container file. Yep. So that's it for the demo. So we really think that like with RamaLama, it's a really great tool to be able to experiment with these LLMs. Like you can try it out really quickly. But what I hear a lot from folks, and when I observe kind of how people's AI journeys in their organization, I think what we find is that, out of the box or like stock AI models oftentimes aren't good enough. And you probably need to inject it with some of your own company's data. You probably need to fine tune it. And so, we really think that with a product that Red Hat is working on called RHEL AI, that makes that really easy to do and performant to do. RHEL AI is also a really great product for production level inference as well, because it embeds VLM, and I think we'll over time we'll be looking to provide optimization. Some of this optimization can be really important because I think I was in one of the talks yesterday that was basically saying with VLM you can see like I think it was like 10 to 20x improvement in performance with VLM. And so whether it's for the end customer experience or trying to make the most of the investment in the accelerator hardware that you already have, this sorts of performance benefits can be huge and be a make or break deal. And so that's where RHEL AI does really well. And then as you go to scale, we really think that a product that we're working on called OpenShift AI, which is an enterprise-grade MLOps platform, is a really great tool for that. So you basically modify your model, iterate, monitor, and scale it. And so these kind of provide an enterprise-grade platform for doing that. Where are we going from here? Again, we started from running the model, and that's like a great first start. We're rapidly looking to integrate things like being able to use your data as context. So for example, being able to give it PDFs or documents to the model itself and then ask the model questions against those specific documents. Because I think that context is really important and matters. For those who are familiar with this space, that's, people refer to that as RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. And so like this capability of being able to use your actual data and ask questions against it, we think is really powerful. So that's coming very soon. And then moving forward, we're looking into stuff like integrating function calling capabilities, so the ability for the model itself to call functions. And broadly, this is kind of like this idea of agentic, which is like, how do you let the model be kind of autonomous and help you to autonomously execute tasks for you, right? So that's kind of more in the future. Finally, I think there's a big conversation going on about AI and what does it mean to be open source in this space. I know that there's probably been like talks at this conference. You probably heard about it in the media and the press as well. And there's a lot of questions about like, okay, well, the source code is available, but what about the data that was used to train a model, or the weights that you need in order to be able to, like that are actually kind of like the meat and potatoes of what allows the model to do what it does. And with RamaLama and with AI in general, like RamaLama and our team, we really want to lean into the open source way as much as possible. We are really excited about community contribution, and so we kind of readily accept that sort of contribution to the project. We just started in June of last year, and we already have, I think, and now it's like actually more than 1,300 GitHub stars, more than 50 contributors, and it's just been half a year. So we're really excited about where this is going to go. So we have, as I mentioned, a GitHub page, website. The QR code is for our Matrix channel where we have our community conversations. So we'd love to have you guys join the community. Check us out, contribute, download it, try it. We'd love to see RamaLama kind of deliver a lot of benefits to folks. So that's it for my talk, and I'd love to open it up for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, everybody. Let's go ahead and give him a round of applause. James, really appreciate you being here. Do we have a first question?
Yeah, so earlier you mentioned that specifically RAG integrations were coming very soon. So I was kind of wondering what type of approach you would take to that, because right now there's a lot of different sort of open source and like some closed source options for running RAG models. So for example, you have like ChromaDB to like vectorize your data and all that. So under like sort of container model, would you have like the actual RAG database inside the same container, or like how would that really work? Because obviously for us, we want to be able to, like that flexibility to run whatever model we want, but if that's kind of constrained to the database as well, then I could possibly see like some kind of issues with that. So what, I guess what approach would you guys really be going for here?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm not that familiar with like specifically the implementation details of like how we're going to do it. I mean, we have looked at kind of a number of like open source, like RAG mechanisms. But I think, what is our goal for RamaLama? It's really to kind of give you the ability to like try it out quickly. And so, we actually have kind of like a homegrown solution that we're going to put in there, just to like make it really easy, right? So you can just try it out like quickly, and then of course, like I'm sure that you probably already even have like ideas about like a more sophisticated way of doing RAG, and certainly we want to like let people do that. But like at a first step, it's like, yeah, I just want to like see what I could do if I have RAG capabilities here, and so we have that kind of like homegrown solution just to be able to try it out. Yeah.
I see. Thank you.
I was just wondering whether there's any possibility if I run the models locally, can I get my GPUs from my MacBook to be used by Podman and the models?
Yeah, that's great. So is your question like, can I use the hardware acceleration that exists in my MacBook? Is that your question?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we're actually working on that right now. Is like, how can we get that like GPU pass through to work? Like I think one of the cool things is that like, and we actually have a lot of kind of expertise in that in-house, and so like we're just kind of working through that. I think what's cool about that space also is that you can then lean on like kind of the open source accelerator stack to make like to further accelerate it. So more to come. Yeah, I think we're actually really excited about that, because we know that a lot of folks do that like development and like want to be able to try it on their MacBook, and so we want to be able to make the hardware as performant as possible. So absolutely.
Yeah, that would allow people to actually try out the beefier and bigger models.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have GPUs, then, well, you're out of luck.
Yeah, yep, absolutely, yep.
Okay, next question. Don't be afraid, we have time.
Yeah, so just like one more question. For RamaLama specifically, is there any specific benefits of using RamaLama as like a full stack compared to using something like Docker and then having like a internal, like in that image, dependencies for that model? So is there any like benefits to doing it like the Docker way or like doing it like the RamaLama way?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like, could you just kind of take the pieces that already exist, or like assemble it yourself and do it in Docker,
Exactly.
as opposed to like RamaLama? I mean, certainly you can do that, right? Like if, and I think like that's where like like the Linux ecosystem, like the container ecosystem is like really great, because you can always piece it together, right? But we don't think, at least my opinion is that like, especially in the early stages, like, do you really want to go through that exercise of like having to assemble it yourself? Like that's where RamaLama I think is really great. And certainly it's not going to fit every use case, right? It's not going to be perfect for everybody's like needs. And so like where you have more specific needs, you can definitely go and like Docker compose it yourself, or like use Podman to compose it. I mean, keep in mind RamaLama does, you can choose your container engine, so it can be Podman or Docker. But like like if you want to, containerize all of RamaLama, that's great. Really easy. If you want to kind of customize too, that's great too. Yeah.
I see. So would you consider like RamaLama more of like optimized for like ease of use over over kind of flexibility, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. I mean, I think there is like some degree of flexibility, but it does at the end of the day have to be like opinionated in some ways because, we're pulling specific container images that have already been kind of pre-assembled to make it easy. So I think from that standpoint, certainly, yeah, like I would say so that, we're trying to make it easy and so like full scale configurability is like sacrificed maybe a little bit.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
I see. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else? Other questions? Okay. One more time, let's give a round of applause for James for coming
All
out to
right.
talk
Thanks,
to us
everybody.
today. We really appreciate it. So this is going to be the last talk in this room, but we do want to remind you we do have our closing keynote with Leslie Lamport in Ballroom DE. So please make sure you stop by that one. I do believe there are a couple of other talks going on as well on the east side building there. So go ahead and check that. Check out the schedules. Make sure you're checking the boards for updates and changes to anything. All right? Thank you all very much.